Hey there, my name is Alex and welcome to Crash Course Sociology. Today we'll be going over the second week of Soci 250 and all of the lecture and reading materials. Because much of it overlaps, I've taken the liberty of using them as one as a helpful study guide. Today we'll be going over some important theories in sociology and how they try to explain what social problems are. So I hope that you enjoy this video and that you learn a lot from it. Without further notice, let's jump into Crash Course Sociology. Alright, now that we've covered some of the fundamentals of sociology, let's get back to basics. By definition, sociology is the systemic study of social behavior in human societies. Sociology is a discipline. Though it is one of the several fields of study designed to help create and explain human behavior, it does not accept common sense as truth because that is highly unreliable and inaccurate. Instead, sociology has worked hard to establish itself as a social science, much like psychology because it strives to make theories that are clear and testable. The question remains, is sociology a science? Well, the definition of science is a body of knowledge obtained by methods of systemic observation. Consider the following. A science study has objects of study. In sociology, we have subjects of study. These can range from individuals to social relationships, groups, social institutions. These can be measured as independent and dependent variables in causal relation to one another. Next, much like an independent variable and dependent variable, sociology has consequences of difference. It examines how resources are distributed and the consequences of that very distribution. Finally, it uses empirical data and methods of collection. These include experiments, surveys, samples, interviews, field research, participant and non-participant observation, secondary data research, and so on. These findings are tested by researchers and analyzed in relation to one another and then evaluated with sociological theory. Verstehen is German for empathy. According to Max Weber, uber-famous German sociologist, empathy is at the core of scientific research. He argued that social scientists must try to understand the views and realities of their subjects according to their experiences, symbols, attitudes, values, and beliefs. Sociology gives us a different framework to see the world. Throughout this course, it is important to use our sociological imagination to understand the experiences of our subjects. The sociological imagination is one of American sociologist C. Wright Mills's greatest legacies to the discipline of sociology. It is a framework that positions an awareness of the relationship between individuals and the wider society. It pushes sociologists to see the connections between individual lives and the larger society we live in. To this extent, one can only really begin to understand our own lives and biographies if we understand the scope of the broader society. Only once this connection is made can we see the relationship between our personal troubles and public issues. Personal troubles are the problems we face as individuals. Public issues are the social problems that arise in society. Sam Richards' TED Talk, The Wisdom of Sociology, has an interesting take on the sociological imagination. He explains that as sociologists, we are empowered by the interconnectivity of individuals and knowing that even though we might not know them, we are connected to each other through our shared thoughts, concerns, and troubles. For instance, he mentions a personal trouble that he and his wife had been faced with. She was going through perimenopause and was suffering tremendously, and hence it was affecting her and their relationship. Yet, when he stepped back and applied sociological wisdom, he realized that they were not alone with these personal troubles. He applied their personal troubles to the broader spectrum of society and made the connection that these were public issues that people face individually across all societies. From this, we must ask ourselves, what makes our experience social? Is one's troubles an outcome of private issues, or do they spill into something far more complex as a result of public issues? As I mentioned earlier, sociology strives to find theories that are clear and testable. Sociological theories give us tools to systematically evaluate social problems. Theories are sets of statements that seek to explain problems, actions, and behaviors. The most effective theories have explanatory and predictive power. Sociological theories are split into two subcategories: microsociology and macrosociology. Microsociology are theories that study small groups and the analysis of everyday experiences and interactions. These theories also consider the agency that a person retains when it comes to their sociological interactions. On the other hand, macrosociology are theories that concentrate on large-scale phenomena of entire civilizations. We will look at examples of micro and macro theories shortly. Now we're going to address social problems and look at how different sociological frameworks seek to explain these occurrings. A social problem is a condition that a segment of society views as harmful to members of its society and that is in need of remedy. There is an objective element to social problems, which means that there is an awareness that something is a problem that stems either from experience or having seen it in the media reports or through other various social institutions. Then, there is a subjective element to social problems. This is the belief that a particular social condition is harmful to society and ought to be changed. To that extent, social problems are variable and change across time, societies, and subjects. For instance, as mentioned in the lecture recordings, abortion is a social problem that varies across political beliefs. While some might see the lack of access and the high regulation of abortion as a healthcare social problem, other political parties will see the lack of restriction of abortion to be the social problem. Therefore, abortion is a social problem that has had its views changed across time, but is still heavily debated by opposing groups due to the subjectivity of its nature. Whereas, let's say, homelessness is an objective issue that society generally agrees is a social problem. To further analyze the subjectivity and objectivity of a social problem, let's examine the stage development theory. Stage development theory suggests that social problems develop in stages. Take X as a social problem. First, there is social recognition, whereby we socially recognize that X is a social problem. Second, societal institutions and agents of socialization legitimatize X as a social problem. Third, people and organizations mobilize against X as a social problem. And finally, there is development and implementation through sanctions, checkpoints, and laws to deal with X as a social problem. However, note that as aforementioned, not everyone has the same consensus of what a social problem is, especially across societies, and that social problems can exist without all four of these steps being launched into activism. This is a theory of symbolic interactionism, which we will look at shortly. Another way to look at the objectivity or subjectivity of a social problem can be understood through the framework of the labeling theory. This theory suggests that a social condition, problem, or group may be viewed as problematic on the condition that it is labeled as such. Therefore, if society labels something, let's say marijuana, as a problem, then it will be perceived as such. On the contrary, if there is a shift in the segment of the population that wishes to advocate change to this perceived social problem, according to this theory, social problems such as these can be resolved by changing the meanings and definitions that are attributed to them. We can even see this shift in Canada in the past few years with the legalization of marijuana. There has been a tremendous shift on viewing marijuana as a social problem since society has changed its views on it. Alright, now that we've covered some of the fundamentals of sociology and social problems, let's look into the main frameworks for sociological thinking. First, we'll discuss structural functionalist perspective. Then, we'll look at conflict theory and jump onto symbolic interactionism, and then we'll end with feminist perspectives. We'll discuss the core of these theories and how they approach social problems. Structural functionalism is a theory that views society as a system of interconnected parts that work in harmony to maintain a state of balance and equilibrium. It looks at how different structures or institutions of society work together to create consensus and social cohesion. It is a macro-sociological theory, meaning that it bases its theories of society at a larger scale. It views societal institutions as crucial to the socialization of individuals, meaning that they work together to adequately socialize individuals to function together into consensus and social cohesion to achieve a state of balance. For instance, in the reading for the sociological imagination, the author explains that if families provide the context for reproducing, nurturing, and socializing of children, then the education system offers a way to transmit society's skills and knowledge and culture. Then politics provides meanings for governing society, and economics enables the production, distribution, and consumption of goods and services, while religion provides moral guidance and outlets for worship. These would be examples of the functional element of society. Functional elements contribute to social stability, while dysfunctional elements, such as crime, violence, disrupt stability. However, there is a fine line between functional and dysfunctional elements, for subjectivity could argue that all of these aspects of society, even crime, are functional and essential, as per Durkheim argued. Then, there are two dominant theories regarding social problems that have developed from structural functionalism that are worth noting. First is social pathology. It explains that social problems are a result of some sickness in society. In this line of thinking, social problems are a result of sickness. Much like our bodies, when they are ill, they cease to function properly. Social illnesses occur when members of society are not adequately socialized and fail to conform to our norms and values. For instance, if juvenile delinquency is a social problem, it can be traced back to a failing educational system. Solutions to social pathology lie in the proper socialization and functioning of society's interrelated parts. Second, we have social disorganization, which occurs due to rapid change and disrupts the norms of society. When these norms are in conflict with one another, society is in a state of anomie, meaning normlessness. This may result in social problems whose solutions include slowing the pace of social change and strengthening social norms. Now, let's put this all into perspective. The founding theorists of structural functionalism are Parsons, Merton, and Durkheim, whom we will discuss shortly. Again, structural functionalism sees society as a set of interrelated parts and assumes that cultural consensus exists and leads to social order, and that balance and harmony are the natural state of society. It views individuals as being socialized by societal institutions to exert social control. The causes for social problems are rooted in the rapid social change and social disorganization and illnesses within our institutions that lead to the inadequate socialization. Solutions include repairing weak social institutions for proper socialization, slowing down the process of social change, and cultivating a strong collective sense of morality. Finally, structural functionalism has been criticized for maintaining the status quo and ignoring issues of power and conflict while assuming societal consensus. The next section deals with the topic of suicide. Therefore, a trigger warning is in place. If this topic is one of your triggers, then I will invite you to fast forward to the next section. Thank you. Now, moving on to Durkheim on suicide. Émile Durkheim was a French sociologist who lived from 1858 to 1917. He is considered as one of the founding fathers of structural functionalist sociology. Accordingly, his theories focused on the ways that different institutions function to maintain social order. He believed that a strong collective conscience contributed to societal order and balance. He believed that anomie was generated when people no longer felt united by a single code of morality and saw modern society as fleeting from its shared collective conscience, because he saw the weakening of traditional institutions. He is most famous for his analysis on suicide. He believed that while suicide is at its core a voluntary personal act, it could be also attributed to one's degree of integration and immersion into society. In 1869, Durkheim researched the suicide rates in France, England, and Denmark per million inhabitants. He studied the countries' beliefs, norms, values, and traditions to see if these social factors could affect the rate of suicide. Hence, you can see the results of suicide per million inhabitant. England had 67, France had 135, while Denmark had 277 suicides per million inhabitants. He wondered why Denmark had such a comparatively high suicide rate as opposed to its counterparts. He found that suicide was directly connected to the group and social life of the individual. These social forces can be grouped via one's cohesiveness within society, their social standing, religious and occupational affairs. In brief, he concluded that one's level of integration in society determined if a person feels connected and accepted, or if they experience anomie. This theory helped explain this solitary act and allowed it to be expanded to the macro-level analysis by looking at broader social groups and social forces as predictive powers. This is a good example of sociological theory, for it can look at social and economic changes and predict whether the suicide rates are destined to rise or drop. Conflict theory looks at how power and inequality shape societal outcomes. It proposes that conflict stems from class divisions over competing interests for power and resources. It considers how the status quo is established and maintained, and who benefits from the distribution of power and the allocation of resources. This is another theory that looks at how the broader composition of society to address social problems and conflicts. Conflict theory is heavily inspired by Marxist theory. Karl Marx was a German philosopher and sociologist who lived from 1818 to 1883. He blamed the capitalist system for enhancing class divisions and inciting conflict over the distribution of goods and resources. According to Marx's theory, societal inequality is determined by the ownership of key material resources, which is emphasized by the power and control of those very resources. In the capitalist system, the bourgeoisie are a powerful class composed of the elite few who own the means of production and rule over the working class. The working class are the proletariat, who are oppressed and alienated from the fruits of their labor, which creates a sense of meaninglessness in their lives. In sum, Marx's theory is concerned with the economy as the root of the social problems. Now, non-Marxist theory is concerned with conflict that arises when groups have opposing values and interests. Again, let's go back to the subjective view of abortion as a social problem. According to non-Marxist theory, such conflict may arise due to the opposing values of the conflicting groups, not merely the ownership of material resources. Now, once more, let's break down conflict theory in the way that we did with structural functionalism. The founding fathers of conflict theory are Marx and Dahrendorf. Conflict theory argues that society is marked by power struggles over scarce resources and that this distribution of resources creates inequalities that result in class conflict. It positions that individuals are inherently good but are corrupted by the economic superstructure of society, of which the elite few control societal institutions and the allocation of material resources. Conflict theory explains social problems via inequality stemming in the dominance of the elite few and the exploitation of the working class, resulting in class conflict. Its solutions include the creation of an equitable system for the distribution of resources in order to minimize competition. Finally, conflict theory has been widely criticized for being a utopian model that fails in practice when it is applied to society, and we've seen what happens with communist Marxist states, and we know how that turns out. Let's look at symbolic interactionism. Its main focus looks at how interactions shape our social worlds. Symbolic interactionism makes generalizations about everyday forms of social interactions to understand society as a whole. In sum, social order is achieved through social interactions and shared meanings to make sense of our world. This is a micro-sociology, which accounts for individual agency, all while considering the social psychological dynamics of individuals as they interact with one another. One of the most famous theories of symbolic interactionism is Cooley's looking glass self. It explains that our identity and sense of self is shaped by social interactions. More precisely, a person's sense of self grows out of society's interpersonal interactions and the subjective perception of how others see us. Second, another interesting theory that comes out of symbolic interactionism is Goffman's dramaturgical model. Goffman explains that we strategically craft and project our sense of self onto others. Our sense of self is a performance that is enacted every day across all of our different roles that we play and all of the different people in our lives. Let's reiterate. In brief, the founding fathers of symbolic interactionism are Mead, Cooley, and Goffman. Symbolic interactionism sees society as a network of interlocking roles whose everyday interaction maintains social order through a shared understanding and meaning to make sense of the social world. Next, it positions individuals as interpretive and interactive social beings who are constantly in the making. Symbolic interactionism sees social problems as a result of different interpretations of roles, the labeling of individuals, if we recall the labeling of social problems that we discussed earlier. It also sees the subjective elements of social problems as a cause for conflict. Solutions include reducing the impact of labeling and stigmatization and altering the definitions of what is defined as a social problem. Finally, it has been criticized largely because it only focuses on micro issues, and these fail to be translated into broader macro-scale concerns. For our last theory, let's look at feminism. Feminist theory is largely forgotten about in the field of sociology. As more women entered the discipline and undertook professional studies in the last century, it became evident that women were largely absent from classical theories established by masculine thought. In fact, Nellie McClung was a female sociologist in the 19th to 20th century who was one of the first theorists to bring attention to gender. While she was ignored by male critics of her era, her work is still very much relevant today. Feminist theory looks at how social problems are gendered and how that can shape opportunities. By definition, it focuses on the inequalities between men and women. This is one of the most important modern sociological perspectives that deserves to be equally valued as the prior theories we discussed. Feminist theory offers both micro and macro scale perspectives. Its three main branches are liberal feminism, radical feminism, and intersectional feminism. Liberal feminism is a macro sociology that seeks to equalize the conditions for women within the existing structures of society. Radical feminism is also a macro sociology which seeks to want more than equal chance to gain access to the formal structures of modern society by demanding change and dismantling the existing structures of society, notably the patriarchy. This would create a truly equal society, all while demanding change between everyday relationships for men and women. Finally, we have intersectional feminism, which offers a micro perspective of sociology by acknowledging the experiences of women who feel different modes of discrimination or privilege on the basis of their combining identities. Let's wrap this up one more time. Looking back at feminist theory, its main theorists are McClung, Smith, and Alway. Feminist theory sees society as characterized by gendered inequalities. It looks at intersectional experiences of individuals and their privilege or discrimination varying depending on their gender, sexuality, race, and class. According to feminist theory, social problems are caused by the social construction of gender as well as the exclusion of female experiences. Solutions vary depending on liberal or radical feminism, one proposing to establish gender equality within the existing structures of society, whereas the latter wishes to abolish the existing structures of the patriarchy to create a more equal one. And finally, criticisms are often centered relying on subjective experience. That's it. That's the video. I hope that you liked my video and that you learned a lot from it. I had a lot of fun making this project and I can't wait to see what you guys do. So thank you for watching and I'm wishing you guys all a happy semester. Stay safe, wear your masks, and study well.